We're going to finish up a little bit with some real estate stuff, and then we'll talk about wills and trust and estate planning a little bit, and then we'll talk about the final exam. Final, of course, is next week at our normal time at 4:30, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the class today. So, page 100. All right, so this is where we finished up last week, if I remember correctly. And just as a reminder, this page will be for sure a fill in the blank question on the final. And I want you to be able to list out up to 4 different estates or interests in real estate or real property, page 100. And in addition, I want you to be able to differentiate between a possessory interest, which is where you have either ownership or the right to use property, like with a rental or a lease. A non-possessory, which is like an easement where you can put a roadway down or something like that, but you don't actually get to stay there. And then I don't believe we talked about this yet. I think that's where we left off. So let's talk about this bottom part, because this also ties in with wills and estate planning, what happens after you die. All right. So this bottom part is when you have more than one person that owns real estate together. More than one owner. Common ownership, or more than one person. So if you want to write there, more than one person, okay? And essentially, this is a form of fee simple, that is ownership. And so the question is, when you own property with more than one person, what happens when one of the other owners dies, when they die? What happens to their percentage? Now there are basically 2 options here. The first option is that their percentage that they own does not go necessarily to the other owner. It goes wherever the dead person's will or other estate planning documents say that they want it to go. It's separate from the other owners. The other option is if there's what we call survivorship right here, with survivorship. That means that when one of the owners dies, the surviving owner gets their share automatically. Okay? So what we're talking about here is what happens when somebody dies to their share. And I want you to be able to differentiate between these. I do have a test question that I commonly ask that talks about which of these have survivorship and which do not. And I want you to understand what that means. So let's start with number 1. Tenancy in common. This is often abbreviated in real estate as a TIC interest. You'll see that in investment information. You'll see that if you read real estate magazines and blogs and whatnot. It's a really common way for people to invest in real estate by buying a TIC, or tenancy in common. So essentially, a tenancy in common is pure percentage ownership. A percentage. You have a percentage that is your separate percentage. You can do with it after you die whatever you want. You can will it to your children, you can donate it to the university, you can do whatever you want. Your percentage does not automatically go to the survivors. So it's separate. It's called a divided interest. Okay? So to make a comparison, let's say we go down to Little Caesars Pizza, right? And we buy a pizza together. We each pay half of the cost for the pizza. And when we get the pizza, we take the pizza while we're at Little Caesars, and we split it in half. I wrap half up in tin foil and I take it home. That's my half. You wrap up the other half and you take it home to your place. So we each have 50% of the pizza. We've divided it. It's our separate share. And I can give my pizza to whoever I want, and you can give your pizza to whoever you want. They're separate. If I die, you don't get my pizza. It goes through my will to whoever I say. My pizza will go to my 3 children equally, right? So it's separate percentage. In other words, no survivorship. This word survivorship means that your ownership interest goes on to the survivor. Now these other two are basically more or less the same thing. The difference between them for purposes of this class really is pretty minimal. But the other two common ways you can own this is joint ownership, or if it's a married couple, spouses that own property together. We call that a tenancy by the entirety. And really what I want you guys to know is both of these have survivorship. So what that means is, one owner dies, the other owner, if they are still alive, they own the whole thing. So if we had a pizza, we bought it together, we basically start eating it, or we keep it, and whoever dies, they lose it, and the survivor owns the whole pizza, right? So joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Now this, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, also applies not only to real estate, but to bank accounts and brokerage accounts and motor vehicles, aircraft, boats, checking accounts with the bank, other forms of assets. So basically, you have more than one person on a checking account, one person dies, the other joint owner owns the whole thing. Automatically transfers over to them. Tenancy by the entirety is a married couple, so there's various ways that you can refer to that. Typically in a deed, we will have the married spouse's names as tenants by the entirety. So if you see that phrase in the deed, that means that there's survivorship between the married spouses. Sometimes you'll see this phrase here as husband and wife, or you might see the phrase as a married couple, or as spouses, various different ways. And that basically creates survivorship between the married spouses. So I want you to know the difference between these two. Which one has survivor, which one no survivorship? Pure percentage separation, which have survivorship. Now, back to TICs, because like I say, these are really common. How can you remember that that's a pure percentage thing for the test? You're like, I don't really remember. Here's how you can remember. Two O's in common. Two O's in a percentage, right? So you see that percentage, that's how you can remember. Tenancy in common is a pure percentage thing. Just like we have the two O's in a percentage mark. Down here, we don't have that. So if it's joint tenancy or tenancy by the entirety, it's not a percentage deal, it's whoever lives. So let me just kind of draw you a diagram, real world. So let's say my brother and I, for example, buy a house. Here's our house, maybe a beach house or something. So John and Bill, okay, that's my brother Bill. So if we're going to be tenancy in common, that means I have a 50% interest, my brother has a 50% interest. So if I die first, my 50% interest goes through my will to whoever I designate, so my three kids, okay? And my brother would then own his 50% share, and then my three children would own my 50% divided 3 ways as tenants in common. Joint tenancy with survivorship, or tenancy by the entirety, basically depends on who is the last one standing. Last one standing owns it all. So it's either going to be 100%, 0%, or 0%, 100%, right? If I outlive my brother, when he dies, he gets 0%. His estate has nothing. I own the whole thing. Vice versa. If I die, my estate has nothing. My brother owns 100%. So it depends on who lives the longest. Now, you can see why this is really critical that you understand the difference between the two. And how do you know? The deed will tell you, and the presumption is if the deed doesn't say, it's a tenancy in common. That's the presumption. All right. Also, this is important because you can see here, this can have a major impact on your estate plan. So if I wanted this tenancy in common situation, so that my 50% goes on to my kids, but the deed deed says John and Bill Hasbrook with survivorship, my kids just got cut out of everything if I die first. So it's really important that you know the difference. And when you go to buy a piece of property, make sure the deed is written correctly. And again, if you're not sure, you need to talk to the title company or a lawyer to make sure you're doing it correctly. If you go into real estate, if you're going to be a real estate agent or a broker, it's critical that you understand the difference here, because when you write up the contract and you go to closing, you got to make sure that on behalf of your client, it's being written correctly. Now for you guys on the test, the fill in the blank question, again 100%. What are some estates or interests in land? I will also accept any of these as a fill in the blank answer, along with these other ones. So you can choose which ones you want. I do have a multiple choice test question, sometimes a true-false question, where I ask which ones have survivorship and which ones do not, so make sure you know the difference. All right, so let's move on and talk about estate planning. Page 107. Page 107. Alex, go ahead and pause this.